Welcome to Red-Handed Crimes channel. Don't forget to subscribe. It was supposed to be an experiment, a way to see the world through the eyes of those who worked for a living. Billionaire philanthropist Adrian Kingsley had always lived in luxury, but something gnawed at him. He wanted to understand the struggles of everyday people, to see life from their perspective. So, he did something no one would have expected. He traded in his tailored suits and private jets for a second-hand cab, disguising himself as an ordinary taxi driver. But what started as an eye-opening social experiment soon spiraled into a chilling descent into a world of crime, deception, and secrets that no one was meant to uncover. Adrian Kingsley, 56, was a man of influence. His face graced the covers of financial magazines, his name was synonymous with wealth and power. But despite his vast empire, he felt disconnected from reality. He had read stories of the struggling working class, but reading wasn't enough, he needed to experience it. He bought a modest yellow taxi under an alias, Mark Sullivan. No one in his high-profile circle knew what he was up to. Dressed in second-hand clothes, his expensive Rolex replaced with a cheap digital watch, Adrian stepped into a world he had never known. His goal was simple: spend 6 months as a taxi driver and learn about the struggles of ordinary people. He had no idea that his decision would change his life forever. The streets at night had their own stories, stories Adrian had never heard from his penthouse office. His passengers ranged from the exhausted nurse working a double shift to the drunk executive who treated cab drivers like dirt. But there was one passenger who changed everything, a woman named Elena Morales. Elena was young, scared, and clutching a small duffel bag as she climbed into Adrian's taxi one evening. She gave an address in a hushed voice, glancing over her shoulder nervously. Adrian's instincts told him something wasn't right. "Everything okay?" he asked casually, looking at her through the rearview mirror. She hesitated, then whispered, "Just drive. Please." Over the next few nights, Adrian found himself picking up Elena again and again. Each time, she looked more exhausted, more frightened. Finally, one night, she confessed the truth: she was running from someone powerful. A man who had her trapped in a life of crime. Adrian, still hiding his true identity, felt a deep urge to help. But what could a taxi driver do against a crime syndicate? Still, he began investigating, piecing together information from Elena's cryptic statements. What he uncovered was beyond his worst nightmares. Elena had been trafficked. She wasn't just running from an abusive partner, she was running from an underground criminal organization that used women like her for their own gain. The police were of no help, some were in on it. And the man at the center of it all? A high-profile businessman, someone Adrian had once shaken hands with at charity events. Adrian knew he had to act. But how? He was just one man. Yet, he wasn't just any man, he was Adrian Kingsley. He had the resources, the connections, and now, the inside knowledge. Using his secret identity as Mark Sullivan, Adrian infiltrated the underbelly of the city. He tracked Elena's captors, gathered evidence, and, for the first time in his life, stepped into the shadows of society's darkest corners. He recorded conversations, followed the money trails, and learned just how deep the corruption ran. As he got closer to the truth, he realized something chilling: the criminals knew about him. Not as Mark Sullivan, the taxi driver, but as Adrian Kingsley. His cover had been blown. One night, while driving his cab, Adrian noticed a black SUV tailing him. His heart pounded. He was no longer just an observer, he was a target. A call came through his phone. A disguised voice warned, "Stay out of things that don't concern you, Mr. Kingsley. Or you'll disappear." But Adrian had already made his choice. With Elena's help, he went public. He released the evidence to the media, exposing the entire operation. He used his fortune and influence to protect the victims, working with underground activists who had been trying to dismantle the trafficking ring for years. The fallout was immediate. Arrests were made, high-profile figures were disgraced, and the organization was dismantled piece by piece. But Adrian knew that justice was never perfect. Some of the key players had slipped through the cracks, and the threats against him didn't vanish overnight. Adrian Kingsley was no longer the same man. The experiment had started as a way to understand struggle, but it had led him to something much bigger. He couldn't turn his back on what he had seen. He founded a new initiative, one dedicated to exposing crime, corruption, and injustice. He used his resources to fund investigations, protect the vulnerable, and ensure that people like Elena were never trapped again. But one thing remained certain: he was now a marked man. The people he had exposed had long memories. They would never forget what he had done. And as he slipped back into his luxurious world, Adrian knew that he would never be the same again. Because once you've seen the truth, there's no going back. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.